Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Fireside Chat with Rich and Matt, Uganda and its mountain gorillas. Presented by Nat Hab expedition leaders Richard De Gavea and Matt Meyer. It's a pleasure to have you both with us today. Richard, I'm going to hand things off to you.
Thank you, Kendall, and welcome all of you. I am very excited to be with you today, and I know Matt is too. And we're talking about a trip that is very close to my heart and that Matt has done on a few occasions, and he has very recently done it. So we're going to go through what the trip's about, what it's like, the animals we encounter, and the situations on the ground as they currently are going. So as most of you would probably know, I've been guiding with Nat Hab for a few years now, and I do Guerrillas, Madagascar, a whole bunch of areas around Africa. And I just feel so privileged to be able to be here with you guys and to be chatting at this time through these crazy times to bring some light into the situation. So Matt, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we can kick this off.
Yeah, thanks, Rich, and thanks, Kendall, and to Nat Hab for hosting us today. Again, it is awesome to be here with you all. It is a trip that's very close to both of our hearts. Rich, having done it a multitude of times, but I having recently done it with my 6.5 month pregnant wife on our very, very belated and delayed honeymoon, which I've now been told is a baby moon. But I also guide starting this year in Uganda as well, but Madagascar, Southern Africa, and it's just an absolute pleasure to be here with you all again. And yeah, we've got an exciting hour ahead to let you know how things are on the ground and to also give you a little bit more of an insight into this incredible trip into the Pearl of Africa.
So basically, when we're talking about this trip, we're going into the beauty of primates. The central part of Africa, the heart of Africa, Uganda and Rwanda, are an incredible treasure trove of species because of its tropical rainforests, its incredible climate, and all of the water that is available to it. So in Entebbe, where we land, is our first stop. And we stay at this really cool hotel called Hotel Number 5. It's a little boutique hotel, but it's very close to Lake Victoria, which is the largest lake in Africa, and it is immense. It is a huge, huge piece of land. And it's such a great place to start because people have a chance on their first day. Generally, people get in about a day early, and we head out, or people can go out and do their own cruise out to see different types of birds, but we go to the Botanical Gardens as a little warm-up, as a walk around where you can start seeing some of the primate species and some of the insects and the people. You get in touch with a lot of the culture. And this is where the trip is going to take a different twist. The man at the top, next to the monkeys, next to those ones there, Matt, he was actually brewing a specific gin called waragi, or waraji, which is a Ugandan gin. It is rocket fuel. It's worth a try. You might try it more than once. You might only try it once, but if you never try, you never know. So there's some really cool things going on, and it's a beautiful little place to go and get acquainted with things. Matt, what was your experience when you were there, when you landed in Entebbe?
So it was my first time to Entebbe, and just very heartwarming and incredibly welcoming crowd and experience getting in there. Everything is up to international standards in terms of COVID protocols, face masks, sanitizing, everything like that. And we were a breeze through the airport and getting in. People are just hungry to have international tourists back in Entebbe, in Uganda. All of the hotel staff, everyone was fantastic. The only thing that has actually changed, besides all of the COVID protocols, was that Lake Victoria has risen about 1.5 meters in the last year, which for the largest lake in Africa is it's kind of a big deal with this giant surface area. I mean, you can imagine 1.5 meters over that extent, how much water that actually is. But everyone is super keen, really excited to have people back, really welcoming. And a lot of the places we actually had all to ourselves because there aren't that many tourists there at the moment. So it's a great time also for social distancing. So you're going into these places and you're not inundated with crowds. The airport was almost empty, and people are very aware of these protocols that are in place worldwide.
I love the city of Entebbe just because of it. It's such a welcoming start to the whole thing, and for me that gets a trip off on the right foot. The Ugandans here, you can see these guys are just dressed to the nines. They are the friendliest people you could ever hope to meet. Besides Matt and I, we're just as friendly, but
and this little guy too.
And this little guy. I mean, they all want their photos taken. The little guys are in it to win it on these things.
Yeah.
But walk around a botanical garden that's been running for 100+ years with trees from all over the world where they were doing experimentation, and they've got seed banks and everything going on there. Plus you have this start to the primates. So you've got the vervet monkeys, the little gray monkeys that we saw there. You've got the colobus monkeys, black and white colobus monkeys. And colobus means mutated because they don't have a thumb. They're one of the primate species that actually doesn't have an opposable thumb. So the colobus means mutated, so they jump around. But your bird species, it is a birding mecca. What is normally a crazy bird in southern Africa, Ross's Tarako is a type of bird, and what we get there, it becomes a trash bird. You just see them all over the place.
They are everywhere, yeah.
I mean, it's just a mind-boggling thing. How was your experience, Matt, with the birds? Because my first time to Uganda, I nearly died when I started leafing through the book, through the starlings, and there were like 60 different types of starling.
And they've got this giant bird. I'm sitting there at the hotel that I was staying at, waiting for my wife, and I'm looking up and I see this thing that looks like a cuckoo crossed with a cuckoo and a gray go-away bird. So it's a big grayish bird. And I asked the owner of the hotel, I'm like, what is that? Well, I don't know. Okay, well, he wasn't that involved in or that keen on wildlife. So I'm sitting there looking through, and I'd never even heard of an eastern plantain eater or plantain eater. So it's this big bird that looks like a cuckoo, makes a call like a cuckoo, and it's just this gray, dull color like a gray go-away bird that I didn't even know existed.
Exactly. Now, when we're moving around, we generally have two vehicles that we move around in, just to create some space for people. I'm not sure how we're going to work the numbers as we move forward in these trips, but obviously we'll always do it with safety involved. Some of the trips have short plane hops to try and alleviate a bit of the travel time, because there's a lot of time on the road, and even though Uganda is not a huge country, the road systems are not the fastest. Every time you hit a little town, every town is built on the road, and then there's speed humps that you have to go over, and you're dodging these Ankoli cows that you see there with the massive horns, because they're walking across the road. So it's quite a big thing. But we head out from there towards something that really blew my mind. And once I'm done, Matt, I'm really interested in your opinion, but the chimps. So we go off to a lodge called Dali Lodge, and Dali Lodge has to be one of my favorite places in Africa. It is situated on a crater lake. It's the second photo down there, Matt, just above the panorama, the thing, yeah. And it's situated on this crater lake, and you look out over the whole thing. The lodge is actually on the top right of that crater, and that is about 400 feet deep, that lake. And you sit out there, and it is the most beautiful setting with the most incredible food and the most hospitable people. And as you get there, we all settle in, great food, get your rooms, everything's rustic but clean and beautiful and well set up. And the next morning is our first chimp trek. Now, when I saw the chimps for the first time, I didn't know what to expect. I'd heard about people who want to go see chimps. Cool, that's great. But this guy, this is Totti, he's unfortunately passed on. He was, at the time that I took that photo, he wasn't cross at me, he was yawning, but it makes it look a little bit more intimidating. But I was sitting on the same log as him, and I was 4 feet away from him. It blew my mind. And as you're walking through the jungle, all you can hear is, ooh, ooh, ooh. You can just hear these chimps going nuts. And it just adrenaline. I just never expected it to be so utterly exciting. What was your experience, Matt?
So almost the exact same, Rich. I'd done several gorilla treks before or prior going to trek chimps, and my wife has volunteered at a few rehabilitation centers, and one of them being a chimp sanctuary here in South Africa, actually. And so I'd heard the sounds and everything, but it's when it's in concrete or in something man-made, it doesn't resonate like it does when you've got the humidity and the smells and everything that you get in the forest. And so you're walking through, and the rangers, so you've got your guide, and then the trekkers are out ahead of you, and then you've got 1 or 2 park rangers as well. So typically there's a group of about 5 or 6 park employees that are with you or with your group, and they're pointing things out, and you're looking at the knuckle marks on the path of where the chimps have been, and then you hear this woo woo, and you're like, oh, is that it sounds like a bird. No, that's the start of a chimp's call. And then they start vocalizing one to the other, because especially at this time of year, we were there in December, where there's an abundance of food. The families will often they'll often disperse, and so they'll be a little bit more fractured than they are in other times of the year, because there's food everywhere. So there's no point in everyone going to one place when they just kind of go around and do their own thing. And so we heard this vocalization. We got to the base of probably a 30 or 40 meter high fig tree, and there's this big male chimp sitting there, and we kind of looked up at him, and he was far away, and then he came down. And I mean, I'm a pretty, in the trekking in Madagascar is not easy either, and you often have to move at speed, because a lemur's this big, and they'll jump through underbush like you've got no idea. And so I thought, okay, we'll be able to keep up with him. Not a chance. And he was at walking speed. And so we were with him for 20 minutes, and then he just lost us, and he dusted us, and he carried on, and we decided, okay, we're going to try and see if we can't find the rest of the group. And my poor wife was pulled through this forest for about close on 8 miles, 6.5 months pregnant, in humidity. And luckily, so when you're doing all of these treks, you've got your masks on, but the guide said, look, for you, keep your mask down, but as soon as we get to this thing, then just put it back up, for any risk of transmission, for anything. And then we heard that exactly as you described, Rich, just that resonating, that reverberate. It's a sound that because even they can be half a kilometer away, and it carries through that forest like honking a horn in a tunnel. It is just unbelievable.
But it's exactly what you're saying, the resonation. I think the canopy of the forest retains all that sound, and it doesn't dissipate up. It just gets channeled forward and keeps pushing on and pushing on. And what is fascinating about what you said there, this was another trek. We got to a point where they were crossing over a road, and one of them stood up. I lost it completely. I was just shouting, evolution, evolution. My guests thought I was stark crazy, but I was so excited.
It wouldn't be the first time, would it?
No, definitely not. But being with these animals is so incredible because of the fact that we are so closely related to them. And what Matt was alluding to there with the masks is we can transmit our diseases onto them. So this is the next biggest part of the conservation side of things. This is a colobus monkey that Matt's got up here, but the conservation side of this whole thing revolves around not only us keeping us safe while we're traveling, but keeping these animals safe. So we have to bear that in mind, and masks will definitely be part of the protocol moving forward, I'm pretty sure, for a long time to come. Matt,
that's my wife there. We were actually sitting at the base of the tree that chimp was in, and this is just to show you just how pregnant she was, but then also with her mask on, and you can see all of our treks like that, masks on. All of the park guides, the trekkers, everyone masks on. So it's standard practice now. It's not even a question. And you go into the parks, they take your temperature, what they're even doing now for the first time is to try and encourage people to be as honest as possible with how they're feeling. They're actually offering a 50% refund on your permit purchase price, which they've never done before, but just to try and encourage people that even if you're feeling remotely ill, to rather own up to it, and then they'll give you half your money back, which they never did that before, as far as I can remember, or as far as I know, and that's just to encourage people, because they don't know what's going to happen with if a chimp does contract COVID. Gorillas, the Western Lowland gorillas, they have a little bit of experience with that, in that the San Diego Zoo had a few gorillas that tested positive for COVID, but with chimps, they're not sure. And because you are often immersed in these groups, I mean, I'm sure you've had a couple of, I mean, with that male that you're saying there, you were 4 feet away from him. And maybe he was upset that you were on his log. Maybe that's his favorite log, but you were that close. And now all they've just said is, instead of it being your 6 or 7 meter viewing social distance, now we're going to be viewing from a little bit further, from 10 meters. So they're just taking all these extra precautions to try and eliminate the risk of something happening that would cause a detriment to these animals.
Yeah, definitely. So this whole part, it takes part in the Kibale forest, but we look out over the Ruwenzori mountains, which Matt's got his cursor over right there. You can open that one up. So the mountains of the moon, sometimes we see them, sometimes we don't. The famous explorer Stanley walked past them twice before he found them. He didn't even know there was a mountain range there. And these mountains are so high in altitude, they can get to 14,000 feet and be snow-capped at certain times of the year. And because of the altitudes, there's massive tea plantations. So beautiful tea plantations that we drive through, and we move along, and we actually cross over the equator and start moving into Queen Elizabeth National Park, which is a bit more traditional safari. That's me 1 foot in either side. I'm always on the fence. But as we move to Ishasha and Queen Elizabeth National Park, the safari experience is unique. And the reason why is because the parks are different. They are very different to what you've experienced if you've been to Africa before, because the people live within the parks. So this is one of the Kazinga boat channel trips that we do. So we stop there, we do a boat channel, then we do a lunch. This is one of my favorite 2 hours. I normally photograph probably 1,000 photographs in 2 hours, just because the bird life just above that match, you can see the flocks of gulls there, and just immense amounts of animals along the edge of this beautiful channel. But I can remember one time, Matt, and I don't know what your experience was when you were there, but I remember sitting in a lion sighting on the one of the first trips that I did. We were watching a lion kill, or the lions were feeding on a kill, and it was all great. Everything was cool. The next thing, all I heard was pring, pring, and a guy on a bicycle came past us, moving through the village, because the villages are inside. It's just normal. And you're sitting there going, okay, this is weird. And then the next thing, a motorbike comes up and he stops and he kicks off his kickstand. He rocks the kickstand up to the side. And then he starts walking to each of the vehicle's windows to check that everyone's permits are correct. So it's the Uganda Wildlife Authority. And the lions are 40 meters away. He's sitting there going, guys, it's a different safari experience, but it is a beautiful experience. And one of my highlights, because we get to see the tree climbing lions of Ishasha. We hope to. There have been a few trips where we didn't get lucky with that. But to see, my most is 7 lions in a tree, 2 big males and 5 other lions, and that was just spectacular. But to see these guys climb up there, Matt, what was your experience like in Queen Elizabeth National Park?
So I mean, because I'm just picturing this chap on his bicycle, and it's probably a single gear, single speed bicycle, not sophisticated at all. It's been held together by duct tape or something like that. So it's not like he's going to win any Tour de France's if he has to get away from any of these animals. And I'm just sitting there imagining gring gring. But one of the biggest issues that is had across Africa with having people living adjacent to or even in national parks is the human wildlife conflict. And one of the biggest problems are these guys, are elephants with croplands and destroying croplands. And what they've done with Queen Elizabeth National Park, because obviously they can't afford to put a fence up, because with fences you've got to have electricity, then you've got to have maintenance, you've got to do all of that kind of stuff. They're not worried about lions. As you said, Rich, you've got a guy that's coming down on his probably $5 bicycle, held together with hopes and good intentions, and the lions aren't even looking at him because he's got nothing. He's offering them nothing. But an elephant, if you put an elephant right next to a beautiful cornfield or a sugarcane field, they're gonna destroy it. And so what they've done at Queen Elizabeth National Park is they don't have a fence. They've got a moat that runs almost the entire southwestern border that goes to the community. And it's about 50 or 60 kilometers of this moat that they've dug that anything can get across except for elephants and hippos. So lions can climb across if they want, but their prey doesn't go there. Leopards move freely, but they don't do anything. But elephants cannot. It's just like going to a park or a zoo in another country where they put a little gap that's 10 feet deep and 4 feet across, and an elephant can't cross it. But you put a 20,000 volt electric fence in front of an elephant. If he wants to go across, he's going to go across. And so that's one of the unique things about Queen Elizabeth National Park is how they've been able to solve one of the biggest problems that has occurred on this continent since we've started these national parks, is how do you stop elephants from raiding croplands? Dig a hole. Done. But the lions were spectacular. We got there. We were the only people in the park. They gave us a guide, which they don't often do because we had our own guide. And we drove around for an hour maybe, and it was one of those, so what are the chances of us seeing a lion there's a lion in a tree. Come around the corner. Do lions ever hang out in groups? There are 3 lions in a tree. Do the male lions often? There's a big male lion in a tree. So it was one of those occurrences where it was just everything happened as it could have planned out. And we actually, this picture that I've got here, if you look at the bottom right hand corner, I only noticed that in post-production. So when I downloaded the pic, we didn't even know there was a second lion in that tree. We had no idea. And so there were 2 male lions there. And no, it was just absolutely incredible to see. It's really great to be able to put a new ungulate species in traveling, and to see the Ugandan cob, it was a first for me. So that's great. It's kind of this stoic looking impala across a lechwe with a little bit of puku thrown into there. And they live predominantly in these sort of marshy wetlands. But I mean, the interesting thing about the tree climbing lion, I mean, Rich, you'll probably be able to explain it a little bit better than I can, having been there so many times. But why do these lions climb these trees?
Tsetse flies. So there's a lot of tsetse flies in the area, and by getting up and out of the grasses, they're able to get out of the range of these flies, and it just puts them in a good position to be able to do it. You can see this guy actually has a collar on him, so they do lion research and also to track them because of these communities. Again, like Matt was saying, those moats that they're cutting in don't always stop it, and human-animal conflict, an elephant is tough to move, a lion is easy to kill, because all they do is, if they want to get vengeance, they will poison carcasses. And it's happened quite a bit, and it's a huge issue throughout Africa, is this human-wildlife conflict that keeps on going on. So these people live within the park. When we do the Kazinga Channel, for example, right as we're about to get to the mouth of Lake Edward, because the channel joins Lake Edward with Lake George. This is right at the behind that boat is actually Lake Edward, which is another massive expanse of water. But there's a fishing village that we go past, and the guys are bathing in the water. They are fishing. They're fixing their fishing nets there, and we have just gone past 50 crocodiles. It has the highest population of hippopotamus, highest density of hippopotamus in Africa. So you consider that hippos kill more people in Africa than any other animal, and these guys just live side by side. They're buffalo that I wouldn't even want to walk near a buffalo, and the buffalo is sleeping in the water also just next to the guys. So it's an incredible system, this Queen Elizabeth National Park, and how it's gone out. I think there's a huge potential for more conservation to be done, but a beautiful place to buffer between the crazy chimps and getting to the most unreal primate, the gorilla. So from there, we have a short drive to get to Bwindi Impenetrable National Park, Bwindi Impenetrable Forest. And this forest is just superb. For me, it's one of the most magical places to be in, because you've got this dense stuff, and it is exactly like the movies. You're hacking your way through, and we have 4 different families of gorilla to go through. Some days you have lots of luck, and your trek can take you 15 minutes. I have had treks that took us 6 hours. So it can swing both ways, and it just depends on how we're doing it. What was your experience with the gorillas, ma'am? And what are they doing in terms of the COVID protocols and everything for the gorillas?
So they were actually a little bit more strict with the gorillas, in that they well, actually, let me go back to yours. They were, so as I mentioned, with the distancing that they're asking you to keep, usually it was about 7 meters. And I mean, obviously, if that gorilla decides that you are in its path and it wants to walk by you, the experienced guides and the trekkers and everyone will just tell you, don't move, turn here, do this, do that. But to avoid that risk, they're giving an even a little bit more of a distance from them. So they're saying 10 meters, which, I mean, you can still see in this picture of Noah. That's 10 meters. You're still pretty close there. You're still pretty close. I mean, you're not within sort of that brushing range that sometimes you do get into, but you've got your masks on. They sanitize. They ask you to sanitize your feet, your shoes, your hands multiple times. So when you sign in at the park headquarters. When you start your trek, they then say, okay, everyone, you start trekking. If you are getting close to the gorillas like they would have done with you, they say, everyone have a sip of water, do this, do that. We'll relax here for 2 minutes, and then we'll go in and see the apes. And then they say, masks on and sanitize your hands once again. So they really are putting a lot of effort into trying to keep these incredible creatures safe. Now, the experiences that we had, because we were literally the only people in the park on both times that we were there. We were down in the Guerrillas section, which is in the southern section of the park, which is often a lot more, you go down first to see the gorillas and then you go up, rather than in the Bahoma section in the north, where, as we've chatted about, you and I, Rich, where you kind of go up first and then down. So we were in the southern side, and the guide said to us, well, look, what kind of experience, like how strenuous you want it to be. And as you've said, and I've also had the experience of having several hours to get in, or 10 minutes. And the one day, so on our first day, we were when we saw these this group, they had built their nest. So gorillas nest in trees. If you can imagine this giant sort of flat top canopy of foliage, and they nest in that. We had driven in on this certain road the night before, and they had nested right there. You could see where we drove past, you could see a nest in a tree above where we had driven the night before. So we had driven that road at about 5:30. So they were likely collecting foliage to build their nests while we were driving in. And one of the reasons that the guides at the park, so our guide here, the lady with the green mask on, she was saying that because there hasn't been that much traffic, the gorillas are a little bit more relaxed coming towards the road. They're not as fearful as the road as they used to be. And they were a little bit apprehensive at us at first, because and this is coming from our guides, this is not an observation that we had made. The trackers have been there this whole time. They've been going in all the time, having a look, but this is the first time in probably close on 6 or 7 months that the gorillas have seen a white face. And even though it's behind a mask, they look, and they were a little bit apprehensive at first, but then on our second trek, you can see here, this is about a month-old youngster, that the blackback who's lying on his back in front of us, very relaxed, he was in front of us, and he called, and out of nowhere came this mother with this tiny little infant. I mean, he's literally a month old, and so the experience is still as amazing and life-changing, but it's just a little bit different now with these gorillas having not been exposed to people for as long as they have. Yeah, it was remarkable, and we had 2 really good treks. Noah was completely capable of doing them, so we often get asked, and I know you've been asked this on multiple times, especially with Uganda, Rwanda, Madagascar, the physicality of these, and you've got trekkers, you've got porters that are helping you with your bags, etc., etc. And I mean, my wife's not very tall; she's about 5'4", 5'5", and she did it 6.5 months pregnant. So that just shows you that this can be done. But sorry, you were saying there, Rich?
Just go back into your photos there, Matt. You were talking about them coming to the road, and where you are with the guide. In the background there, you can see the tea fields. And this is another part of things, that the high altitudes of these forests, and the reason why they're called mountain gorillas is because they live at high altitudes, but it also is favorable to growing tea. Now, you want to try and stop that human-animal conflict. So the one way that they do it is by planting tea plantations along the edges of the forest. One, it delineates the edge of the forest. So it helps park rangers figure out if anyone's trying to illegally chop down any trees and use the timber. 2, tea is such a high tannin, distasteful, unpalatable thing to a gorilla that the moment they get to it, they turn around and go back to the forest. And it's dense. It's uncanny to try and, it's not easy to move through or do any of these things. So, you know, like Matt was saying, that distance is always a big thing. Every time I have had the pleasure of being with the gorillas, distance has been a very important part of the experience. But that distance gets broken because you cannot get far away. This baby came up right out towards us. The other parts are that sometimes they're just in very thick stuff, and the only way you can see them is if they're moving foliage and getting you close enough. So it's going to be interesting, I think, once tourism picks up again, to see how that plays out in the greater scheme of things. This is more the 7-meter distance that should be kept between the animal and ourselves. We obviously have these moments that they do get a bit closer, and in like Rwanda, you can't even get away from it. I'm just been inquiring in Rwanda now for trips, and the way they're doing it now is that every national park that you go to in Rwanda, you have to have a negative PCR COVID test. And you have to go, you can't get it in the States and then say it's negative and then land and go where you want. You have to arrive in Rwanda and they will test you there. You wait at your hotel till you get your results. And your first port of call, because they don't want the gorillas to be impacted by this, is to go to the gorillas. You can't leave it as the last anymore on that trip itinerary. You have to go straight there. So the difference between the gorillas, and this is a great image that you had there, Matt, and that one too is perfect because you can see them eating figs. There is a lot of talk at the moment about speciating or subspeciating the mountain gorillas between those in Bwindi Impenetrable National Park and those in Volcanoes National Park. Volcanoes National Park falls between Rwanda, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Uganda, along a whole range of volcanoes. It's absolutely spectacular to see. But one of the greatest differences is the fact that the ones in Uganda and Bwindi eat fruit and the other ones don't. And the other thing is that there's physical differences in the hair, because the ones in Rwanda actually have been pushed higher up into higher altitudes because of farming, that they have a higher, it's colder there and they have a high rate of colds and flus. So what they've done is they've actually got a thicker fur and almost a reddish patch to the front of the silverbacks. You can't see it really well on this guy, but their fur is definitely longer and they look a bit shaggier than the ones in Uganda. This was a mother and her baby. It was a 3-day-old baby. It was a beautiful experience that on its own. But each time you go there, it changes. I have had the privilege of trekking with gorillas 52 times, and I look forward to the next 152 times because it is just something that enters your soul and gets you going. Matt, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on top of that before we move on to some questions.
Yeah, it's just it's so hard for me and a lot of the time for guides, and I've spoken to several guides about this. It's often so hard to quantify these experiences because we are so fortunate in that we get to do this for a living. So we go to these places and this is our job. And so you can often get jaded by, and I know I did certainly in some mainland African safaris where you see leopards and lions and rhinos and elephant, all of that. You can often, you take it for granted. And I've gone a few times as a guest to other places, and it's been incredible. But I've often thought, like, are a lot of these trips really worth what a lot of our guests are paying for them? And our trip completely was budget. We stayed at the most budget accommodation. Everything in Uganda is US dollar based. So for us from South Africa, the exchange rate is really not on our side. So we did it as budget as we could, and it still blew our travel budget for the next 5 years. But I can say, without a doubt, every cent worth it. Spent 100%. This is the most incredible natural experience that you can experience, to go and see these creatures, the chimps, the gorillas that are so close to us, and to look into, I mean, look at this, look into those eyes and not see a mirror looking back at you. It's just, it really is. And I mean, I know you don't even have to ask the question to guides that are fortunate enough to do gorillas and chimps on an itinerary. You don't even have to ask the question, what do you think? Because I know Rich will back me up 100%, saying that it's the most incredible experience to see a gorilla in the wild. And so for us, for this time, actually being the guests and doing it, worth every penny. I can honestly say that it is one of the most valuable experiences you can do in the wild.
Life altering. It really is. I mean that sincerely. Kendall, do you have any questions for us?
Oh yes, we've got some good questions for you. I just want to remind everyone watching, if you have a question for Rich or Matt, you can submit those in your control panel under the questions field. All right, I'm going to start off with some more trip-related questions. First one, obviously, how fit does one need to be to go on this trip? Is it really high altitude for the hikes?
Okay, so the altitudes, it depends on where we are and where the gorillas are. So fitness is key to this trip in general. But that being said, at every single trek I have done, at the end, the guys talk about the fact that they want people to experience this. They've taken blind people up there. They've taken people who are fully disabled up to the gorillas. They have what they call the helicopter. It is a very large, almost Caesar type. What's the word?
A gurney.
Yeah, like a gurney. But they literally carry you. You will get 14 porters, 6 at a time, carrying you, and they will rotate as they walk you through the jungle to get you to that point. So I always tell the guests, be fit, get yourself in as much, you will enjoy the experience better the fitter you are. Getting into the gorillas and sucking gas and sitting going for the first 25 minutes of your designated 1 hour, you do not get more than 1 hour at all ever.
Mm-hmm.
So you sit for half an hour trying to get oxygen because of the walk that you've had, you lose the experience. So the fitter you are, the better it is, but you always leave your ego at the bottom of the mountain. There is no point in it. We are all going to struggle. We give you 1 porter as part of the cost of everything. So you have 1 porter, and I always say to everyone, get a second porter, push and pull. 2 hands on the bum, pushing you up the hill, 2 hands on your arms, pulling you up the hill. Before you know it, you're at the top. You don't even know about it. It's slow. It's not a race, but it is physically challenging. And that's what makes the experience just that much better, is that it is not just climb in a safari vehicle and drive from one animal to the other. There is a sense of accomplishment just getting there, let alone the privilege of getting to see them.
And when is the best time of year to go, and what would the weather be like?
Okay, so there's a few of these, and Matt can fill in where he wants, but we've got trips in January, February now, which is a great time of year, and we've got trips running from June through November or October, November. All of those times are great. It is a rainforest. It is the equator. They wouldn't have called it a rainforest if it was going to be dry. you expect rain on every single trek, but they have a wet season and then they have a really wet season, and we avoid the really wet season. So any time that the Nat Hab trips are scheduled is a great time. And we generally push the photographic ones in different periods where there's even less chance of rain, just because of the fact that we want camera gear to stay as dry as possible and have the best photo opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, you can see here this picture where you've got this agricultural land in the front and then you've got the forest behind, and you notice where the clouds are. These forests, they generate their own weather patterns. And so even if it isn't the rainy season per se, there can be a little bit of rain almost every day as this forest is generating its own weather systems. But like Rich said, at the beginning of the year, this time of year now, February, March, great time of year to go. And then June through October, also when we run our trips, when Nat Hab runs our trips.
I remember one trek, it was 6 hours of chaos, so it brings in that fitness side of things. But we had 2 torrential downpours where the path that we were walking down became a river, and we had to sort of sit back for a little while, wait for the runoff to happen, and then start walking. And that's where you have your 2 porters, and these guys are walking around in gumboots. You've got the state-of-the-art hiking boot, you've got poles. These guys have nothing. They've got these rubber boots and they do not slip. And if they do, the other porters tear them a new one. They absolutely laugh at each other so hard because they fell.
It's like watching a bunch of teenagers in a skate park on their skateboards, and if one falls, everyone looks at him and says, you just fell. But yeah, I mean, like you said, we've got all of this tech, you're sophisticated, you're everything. I mean, I've had, not so much in Uganda because of the fire ants, but certainly in Rwanda, I had a porter in flip-flops once. So there you are in all of this tech gear, and there's this guy in overalls and flip-flops. And you think, now, is everything that I have? But you know what? It does, because it keeps you safe, it keeps you relatively dry, and it keeps bugs from biting your ankles with all of the gear that you've got. But yes, it is a huge dichotomy between the porters, and another thing with the porters, you were saying, is that it's a direct injection into their local community. So these porters they do it on a rotation basis, and so you'll have a group of porters at each entry into the park, at each of their villages, and a lot of them are either former poachers or loggers or something involved to the detriment of the park. And these guys now, guys and girls, now see a value to this, because they come, they stand in their line, it's on a rotation. So if today there are 15 of them and they only need 10 porters, tomorrow only 5 of them will come and they'll move through a rotation. And they get $15 per person per day, straight into that community. It doesn't go anywhere else. It doesn't change hands. It doesn't go to the government, nothing. It goes straight to that community. And that's another reason why, like Rich was saying, and I've done it as well on my treks, is you encourage people almost to get a second porter, because then that's another injection. And $15 to you and I and all of our travelers is not a huge amount of money, but to a lot of these local communities, that's food on the table for a couple of days. And so that's another important, it's that community integration, which a lot of these, and certainly Uganda, have done very well. They've integrated and they have those local communities on their side with the tea plantations and seeing a value to these parks.
Absolutely. I remember having entourages of porters who were doing nothing. They had just been taken along, and we had a 5-minute walk to the Guerrillas. So it works wonders. Kendall, give us another one there.
All right. So there's some curiosity about whether Nat Hab supplies hiking poles or boots or raincoats. And also, what kind of camera equipment do you recommend for this trip?
Okay, so each of the lodges at the start points of the walks, there are walking sticks. There are no proper hiking poles, but there's walking sticks, like what you can see in the image there. And this is one of the guests and one of the porters on the right hand side. So you don't carry your own bag. In terms of equipment, we have a day pack that goes in with us. The porter carries that. That generally has a lunchbox in it that's supplied, that we get from the lodges. And then once you get in there, our camera gear, this is a personal thing, but you need really fast lenses. If you don't have one, that's cool. Rent one before you come. You want a f2.8 lens, which is a big aperture so that you can get as much light in as possible. You're in a jungle with a canopy over your head. The shutter speeds are really slow. It's very dark. So the faster your lens, the better the opportunity. And my go-to lens is a 70 to 200, 2.8. And then I love a 135, 1.8 as a play around, just for different types of shots, and maybe a wide angle to go in. A lot of the new mirrorless cameras have some very good fast stuff to work with. And if you're doing a trip with any of us and you haven't used the camera like that, for the most part, if you are interested in photography, you can rent something, bring it through without knowing anything, and Matt and I will sit with you and show you exactly how it works. It really is not rocket science, and that's what we're there to do, is to assist you guys with all these things, and get you accustomed to it. And I know with my trips, I always share images that I get with the guests, because it allows people to also not just worry about images. It gives you time to just sit and be there, which is more important than a photo, I can promise.
Exactly. And I mean, I'm sure you say that on your trips as well, Rich, when you've got people that you often just say, guys, take your photos, take 15, 20 minutes, even 40 minutes of photos, but then for at least some of the time, put everything down and just soak it all in. Just be present and not looking just through the back of a shutter of a camera.
Yeah.
Good advice. Okay, there's a few people who are wondering if they get vaccinated before they go on this trip, do they still have to wear masks while they're hiking?
Yes.
Yes.
My standard protocol will be whether, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be not just exclusively for gorillas, but certainly for gorillas and for chimps. They've made it abundantly clear, and this is conversations that I had with guides, with park wardens, you name it there, that it doesn't matter who's been vaccinated, who hasn't been vaccinated, because you can still be a carrier even after you've been vaccinated. Masks are probably going to be the new norm. I mean, they were that way in the Congo for a very long time. With their in Virunga National Park, you had to wear a mask, and I think that is still standard protocol there. But for I think that will be going forward, and I don't think they're going to say no masks or anything like that. I think that's going to be standard operating procedure from now on, whether you're vaccinated or not.
And on that topic, do you recommend disposable or cloth masks?
Cloth masks offer a certain amount of breathability, but again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, with the park guides, when you are not with the apes, they are understanding, and if you have difficulty of breathing, like Noah being pregnant, they said, look, just take your mask down, but as soon as we get into proximity to the apes, then you have to put your mask up. Like a simple buff won't do. A lot of and certainly like in shopping centers and things here in South Africa, where it has been it's been standard and been a law to have to wear a mask, buffs don't cut it anymore. So an actual mask needs to be done. but your N95 masks, they're often cumbersome and they're difficult to take on and off. And so a cloth mask that wraps around the back of your head is easy to take up and down. But in saying that, with photography, certainly an N95 mask is a bit easier because you don't get that steam coming up on the inside. It's usually deflected down the bottom, not over the top of your nose, whereas the cloth masks, because they're not as tight on the top of your nose, when you're sitting there trying to take a photo and you're breathing in and out, your viewfinder gets fogged up quite a bit. So it's really a personal preference as to what you feel more comfortable with. But standard masks, all of the guides and the porters you can see here, they're all wearing cloth masks. Noah just wore the N95 mask because it was a little bit more comfortable for her on that day when it was quite warm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a little pro tip, and there are now lots of anti-fog things out for glasses. You could use that on the back of your screen or on your viewfinder. Don't put it on the lenses, but just on the backs there to stop that fogging up if you do have that issue moving on.
That's great. So there's a big question about how bad the bugs are on this trip.
What bugs? There are very
so
few.
In Bwindi, you're at altitude, so there are no mosquitoes. Mosquitoes can't survive at altitude.
Yeah, it really is a very nice. There are a few places where there might be bugs, like Ishasha, where we've got the tsetse flies that we were talking about, and mosquitoes can eat you, but a little bit of DEET all disappears in a heartbeat. But really, for most of my trips around Africa, all I have ever had are guests going, but I thought there would be bugs. There are worse bugs in Texas than there are, or in Alaska, than there are here in Africa.
Yeah. The only thing that they do recommend you do is the park guy you can see, and one of the reasons why they've got their gumboots tucked in, and you can see this guest here with his pants tucked into his socks, and all of the guests there is that they've got ants that it's not a pleasant experience for them to climb up, so you just tuck that in and then you don't have to worry. But yeah, other than that, nothing.
Yeah. Right. So those bugs, those ants are called safari ants, and they go in massive. They're army ants. They just eat anything in the way. So if you're in the way, they'll try and eat you too. They're nasty. Gives you a good reason to call ants in your pants.
Yeah.
All right, last trip question before I move on to more general questions. It looks like there's someone who is traveling in December out there, and they're just wondering if they should plan on coming a few days early to get tested in order to wait for results.
I think you'll be able to do your tests on your side and then be able to come in with those results. The biggest thing depends on, like for us in South Africa, we have to come with a valid 72-hour longest period test to come back into the country, and they do a PCR test at Entebbe that takes 12 to 24 hours for anything just shy of $100 for that test.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, we did ours in Kampala, and it was literally, we did it at 3:30 in the afternoon, and we had our results emailed to us by 4 o'clock the next morning, had our hotel printed out, and that was valid to get back out, and it was $65. And very easy, very clean, open, all top all marquees out in a parking lot, so you're all open there. You're not going into a hospital, into a clinic, anything like that. It's literally, it's called Test and Fly in Entebbe, and it's the one that everyone uses, and it's a big open parking lot with tents up on it, and quick and easy, simple, done, no problem.
Great. All right, I'm going to throw out, it is the top of the hour, so I'm just going to throw out a couple general questions for you before we close it out. There were a lot of people curious about the moats that you mentioned earlier in the presentation. They were just they're aware that elephants can swim, so they're just wanting some more information on how these moats actually deter the elephants.
So they're not actually a moat filled with water. So my apologies for any confusion there. It's just a giant ditch. So basically, it's
Trench.
about 6 feet. Yeah, it's a trench. It's about 6 feet across and about 6 to 8 feet deep, and it runs almost the entire southwestern boundary of the park. So it's just a big trench that takes place of a wall. So it's not filled with water. Elephants can swim very easily, but elephants don't like going down steep embankments, and they can't cross any gap bigger than about 2 feet, even though they're these massive creatures. A couple of feet between spaces that they want to get from A to B, they just can't do it.
Right. And there was a lot of curiosity about what has caused the water level increase in Lake Victoria.
I've looked it up not extensively, but I've looked it up since I've been home, and I couldn't find anything. No one in Entebbe knew, but the water there is fed. So Lake Victoria is at this little town or the city called Ginger. That's the source of the Nile, and the catchment for that are these mountain ranges that you're going from Kabali down into Bwindi, and then the lakes in Rwanda as well. And so it was probably just extensive rain in those mountains that it all accumulated in one area at once. But yeah, it was literally one of those overnight things where this whole lake just rose overnight. And a lot of the properties in Entebbe, because Entebbe is almost this little island on a peninsula to the southwest of Kampala, the big city capital of Uganda, and the whole perimeter of Entebbe is a beach. And so all of these hotels and properties, and not the one that we stay at, but they all have beachfront access. So you got this restaurant and this bar and everything on the beach, and then they woke up in the morning and there was water where there used to be a beach. So probably just very high rainfall in the mountains the weeks that predecessor, because it's like the water movement would kind of be like when the Okavango Delta fills up. It rains in the Angolan highlands, and then a month later they've got this flood into the delta. And so it could have been something where, because they didn't think, oh, there was a rainfall in the mountains 3 weeks ago, we're going to see it here. But if everywhere rains all at the same time, that feeds into Lake Victoria, it'll cause that rise.
All right. Well, I'm going to call it there with questions. Thank you so much, guys. This was really fun and interesting, and I know everyone had a great time today, so I appreciate you taking the time to present for us. I'm going to turn it back over to you for closing comments.
Go ahead, Rich.
Go ahead, Matt.
Okay. Well, thanks, Kendall. Thanks, Nat Hab. Thanks to WWF. Thanks to all of you guys for joining in the middle of the day. Daylight savings. Thank you to us here. It's 11 o'clock at night, so that's why both Rich and I, you can probably see the back of our eyelids at the moment. But it's awesome, as always, to present to you. And this was a trip that and an experience that was very near and dear to my heart, getting to share it with my wife and soon-to-be little baby girl, who's arriving in about 6 weeks' time. And I know this is a trip that is also near and dear to Rich's heart as well. So thank you for sharing this with us today, and I hope you enjoyed it. So yeah, Nat Hab, WWF, all of you guys, Kendall, Rich, thanks so much, guys.
Nat, thank you. Thanks, Kendall. Thanks, Nat Hab. Thanks, WWF, for the opportunity to chat to all of you guys and really get this out there and chat about what we're going to be doing. I'm excited that we're getting ready to start heading back into these incredible places. But in the meantime, Matt and I are doing another talk in a couple of weeks on amazing birds in Africa, so something completely different. So tune in for that. But thank you all, and love chatting, and thank you, and we will see you soon.
Thanks again, guys. And just for everyone watching, if you have any further questions about this trip or travel in general, please give us a call at the office. We'd be happy to answer your questions. That phone number is 800-543-8917. And my thanks as well to everyone who tuned in. Be sure to join us tomorrow. Oh, nope, today's Friday. Join us on Monday for our next Daily Dose of Nature. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. And with that, I'll conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. Good night, guys. Have a good weekend.
Good night, guys. Thank you.
Good night. Thanks.